Well, hello everybody. Roger here, and welcome to my channel, Rogers Reads. And today is my Saturday book chat where I discuss the books that I've read during the week and books that I intend to read next week. So this week I ended up reading 3 books, which isn't too bad of a reading week. Now the first book I read was Catcher in the Rye by J.D. Salinger. So I originally read this as part of a rereadathon challenge put on by Michael over at Catalyst Reads. Now, The Catcher in the Rye was a book that I remember reading in high school, but for some reason, I never finished it. At least I don't think I did. I figured that this was probably a boring, overly wordy classic, like many of the ones I had to read in school. Henry James comes to mind for some reason, but boy, was I wrong with this one. So The Catcher in the Rye follows and is narrated by 17-year-old Holden Caulfield, who has just been expelled a few days before Christmas break from yet another boarding school. This time, was it Pensy Prep? For poor grades. Now, given that his parents won't receive his expulsion letter for several days yet, Holden decides to lay low for a few days before heading home to face their wrath. So after an altercation with his roommate, Holden packs up and leaves the school in the middle of the night with money in his pocket and takes the train to New York, where he checks in somewhat of a sleazy kind of hotel. Holden then tells us what he did during his last day at Pensy and the few days following his departure. Now this is the perfect example of voice in writing. I felt like I was literally hearing these words right from the mouth of Holden himself. And I have to say that reading this book brought out my inner 15-year-old. Now, there were certain parts of the book where I caught myself laughing out loud hysterically at Holden's running commentary, his exaggerations, his hyperbole, and his unique insights about the world, all peppered by his use of very colorful language. I just thought his descriptions and comments were so rich, but they were also quite interesting and captivating at the same time. Now, I will say that if you're offended by the word goddamn, then this book is definitely not for you, because probably second only to the word bastard, this was one of Holden's favorite words. It also cracked me up how anytime someone would mention someone's name, Holden would chime in with, "Oh, that bastard." You know, I know somebody who does exactly the same thing. Every time you mention somebody's name, "Oh yeah, that bastard." Now, it also tickled me to no end how Holden was always putting on his crazy red hunting hat and asking everybody where all the ducks went when the lake froze in the winter. I thought that his red hat was a wonderful reflection of his offbeat and unique personality. I think that one of the reasons this book might be a classic is because it is timeless. Though it was written in, I believe, 1951, it felt fresh, as though it could have been written yesterday. And in it, I feel Salinger has expertly captured the mind and essence of a teenage boy, whether it be in 1951 or 2018. So in summary, I loved this book. And in my opinion, it really is a masterpiece. I don't know why it took me so long to read it. I was actually really sad that this book ended, and in leaving Holden, I felt it as though I was saying goodbye to a dear friend. So yes, this is definitely a book that I will be rereading, probably several more times in fact. It was truly a fun book, and I gave it 5 stars. So the next book I read was entitled After the Blue Hour by John Rechy. So set in the 1960s, the story follows a 24-year-old writer named John Rechy who has received a letter from a fan, Paul Wagner, who, after having read some of Rechy's work, invites him to spend the summer on his private island, along with his sensual mistress Sonia and his very strange, kind of creepy 14-year-old son Stanty. So a good part of the book revolves around exploring the sexual dynamics between John and Paul via conversation. These intellectual discussions often devolve into a retelling of past sexual encounters, mostly considering of Paul sharing hateful memories about his exes. So the conversations take some strange turns, and it doesn't take us too long to figure out that Paul is not only a master manipulator who wormed his way into money through marriage and divorce, it's also clear that he loves to indulge in power plays and mind games, the darker the better, and that he may also be a very dangerous man. Now, unfortunately, there were several things that didn't work for me in this novel. I disliked the extreme misogynistic views of Paul and his excessively vulgar and increasingly frequent misogynistic rants, which became tiresome and quite offensive after a while. Now, because of the bitter displays of Paul's attitude towards women, including his current mistress, and our protagonist's ever-growing dislike for his hosts, I found the atmosphere of the novel growing more and more toxic as I progressed through it. There was a feeling of seediness to it that kind of left a bad taste in my mouth. Now, truth be told, I didn't like any of the characters in the novel, including our protagonist, John Recchi, so it's difficult to have positive feelings about a book when I felt that none of the characters in that book were deserving of those feelings. They were not only damaged and messy, but I found them wholly unlikable and completely unrelatable, especially the host, Paul. I found him to be an unprincipled and vile human being. Now, the novel did contain elements of suspense, intrigue, love, desire, and human relationships, but most of this was presented in a snippets of conversation between the sun deck and the bar. In other words, not a whole lot happens in the book. Additionally, the novel does take the reader into some pretty dark, gritty, and uncomfortable places, which might be difficult for some readers. And because of the continued hate speech and the almost pornographic actions of the characters, I found the novel difficult to read as I related less and less to the characters and to the story. So I would have to say that this book just was not for me, and I ended up giving it 2 stars. So the third book I read this week was Thunderhead by Neal Shusterman. This is a book 2 in the Arc of a Scythe series. I already did a book review on this channel about the first book, Scythe. So Thunderhead picks up a year after where the first novel, Scythe, left off. Now, it's worth mentioning that there are no longer any governments in this society. All jurisdiction falls under what's called the Thunderhead, which has evolved from the internet's cloud as we know it now. So the Thunderhead is the ultimate jurisdiction and knows everything about everybody and intervenes when necessary. As a society, nobody really fears the Thunderhead. On the contrary, it's almost revered because the Thunderhead does protect and provide for everyone. It's also developed its own consciousness as it evolved from the cloud to the Thunderhead. Now, the only exception to the Thunderhead intervening in the lives of others is when it comes to scythe business. It was agreed upon long ago that the Thunderhead would have no jurisdiction when it came to scythes, and it completely and always stays out of scythe business. So even though the Thunderhead can't get involved in scythe business, it does watch, and it becomes increasingly apparent that it does not like what it sees. So in the novel, Scythe Anastasia performs her gleanings in relative peace, despite her method causing a rift in the scythedom. She gives each of her subjects, or the people that she's going to glean, a month to choose how they want to be gleaned, which of course is scythe speak for how they want to be killed. So Anastasia also cannot escape by hearing news surrounding a rogue scythe who goes by the name of Scythe Lucifer, who is someone actually that she cares about and knows very well. So Scythe Lucifer is hunting down corrupt scythes as a vigilante and bringing permanent death to those who do not adhere to the original scythe principles of compassion and high moral standards. Given that the Thunderhead has no jurisdiction over the Scythedom, it has done absolutely nothing to stop Scythe Lucifer, and even though the Scythedom has asked for intervention, the Thunderhead has refused, which the Scythedom found kind of strange and unsettling, because Scythe Lucifer is not a scythe, nor has he ever been ordained as one. Now, Scythe Lucifer himself is both confused and surprised by the Thunderhead's apparent lack of intervention, so he continues along with his quest until he falls into the hands of an old enemy, and then things quickly go downhill for him. So when this old enemy resurfaces, he throws the entire Scythedom into utter chaos via scheming, conniving, deceit, and malice. And we can't help but wonder, as a reader, whether the Thunderhead will break its own rules and intervene. There's also a new and multi-layered character named Grayson Tolliver, I think his last name was, who plays an important role between the Scythedom and the Thunderhead, and I really can't wait to see how his role is going to evolve in the next book. So in this novel, we delve deeper into the Thunderhead's brain and learn more about how the Thunderhead operates and thinks through various diary entries, much like what we saw with Scythe journals in the first book. Now, I will say that there is a huge climax and twist at the end of the book, which left me wanting more. Yes, it's a major cliffhanger, and I cannot wait for the next book. Now, even though I'm not a fan of cliffhangers, as many of you know, I have no choice but to give this book 5 stars. I loved it that much. I just hate that I have to wait until 2019 to see the story resolved. So I'll probably do a full-on review of this book in the coming days on this channel. In fact, I plan on doing a review of all 3 of the books that I read this week. Oh, and by the way, I also listened to Thunderhead on Audible, and the narrator, Greg Tremblay, was once again phenomenal as a narrator. I'm definitely going to get the 3rd installment of this book on Audible as well. So this week, I also started a new audiobook called Flowers for Algernon, which I'm really enjoying so far. And I started 2 new books, The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, and what was the last one? Oh, The Miseducation of Cameron Post, which I will hopefully have finished by next week. So that is it for this Saturday's wrap-up. I hope you enjoyed this little mini discussion, and I will talk to you in the next video. As always, I thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.